Okay, so in this lesson, we are going to talk about the process of digestion in the mouth and in the stomach. Okay, in later lessons, we will talk about other body parts. So, just to remind you, the function of digestion is to reduce a, a mouthful of food in big pieces into smaller and smaller bits until the bits are reduced to their molecules. And that's because the step after digestion is absorption. So we know in order to go through a cell membrane, the molecules have to be very, very small, right? So we're going to take a big piece of food and we're going to reduce it down to very small molecules so that it can pass through the cell membrane. The reduction of food, the digestion of food takes place physically. So there's two types. Physically by chewing, mixing, and churning, right? Chewing happens in the mouth. The mixing and churning happens in the stomach. Um, so process is called physical digestion. So physical digestion is when our body parts move the food around and make the food smaller by moving it around. Uh, the reduction of food also takes place chemically by the action of enzymes. Remember, enzymes are proteins, and their job is to make chemical reactions easier and faster. So, enzymes help us break down food quickly. If we didn't have enzymes, we would die from lack of energy because the process naturally takes place slowly. Think about if you leave an apple on the counter of your kitchen. How long would it take to break down into molecules? A very long time. It would eventually, when it goes rotten, break down into small molecules. But we have enzymes to help us so we can get the energy from that apple quickly, right? And when we use enzymes to do digestion, it's called chemical digestion. So let's take a look at digestion in the mouth. Okay, so here I have a somewhat pretty diagram of a mouth, and this shows the different type of teeth. The digestive structures of the mouth are the teeth and the salivary glands. Okay, so we have the teeth. Teeth is for physical digestion, and salivary glands are chemical, and this is because they have an enzyme called amylase. Figure 10.3 shows that the teeth have different shapes. So you have your teeth, their structure, their form um, is based on what they do. So you have your front teeth. These are called incisors, and they're for biting, right? You have your canine teeth, right? Canine means dog, but you have teeth that are pointy, right? On the top and the bottom of your mouth, just outside of the incisors, right? And these are for tearing, usually like meat. Okay. You have premolars. Premolars are there to help you grind your food. So if you are eating, say, nuts or seeds, they will help to make them smaller. And then we have molars for crushing, right? For very hard food, like if you have a raw carrot, they will help crush the carrot. Okay. So it says some teeth have a chisel shape, right? Those would be the canines and the incisors, and they're suitable for biting food. So the chisel shape, right? Chisel is like pointed, right? When you think of a chisel, don't laugh. Oh, I'm sorry. Right? Chisel is like pointy. That's a very fat chisel. Okay. Um, right. So chisel is pointy, and that this is for biting. And then some are like a flat shape, right? So if it's pointy, it's for like biting and tearing. And then if it's flat shape, it is for crushing and grinding. You're all laughing at my drawings. I don't care. Okay, so if they're pointed, they tear food. Sorry, if they're chisel shaped, they are for biting. So that's the incisors. So that we call those chisel shaped, right? We call these ones pointy. Okay, and then um, right, and these are like flat. All right, enough of my bad pictures. So, chisel shape for biting, pointed for tearing, flattened for crushing and grinding. Together, all of the teeth begin the physical process of breaking food into smaller pieces, right? So we say physical digestion. Teeth are aided by the moistening action of saliva, right? Saliva has water in it and enzymes from the salivary glands. Saliva also contains the enzyme that starts to chemically break down uh, the carbohydrates that you eat into molecules of glucose, right? And this one here is called amylase, and it is responsible for chemical digestion, right? It is responsible for hydrolysis. Remember, it was like we had a starch plus we had water, and then we made glucose. It broke down the chain. We did a lab on it. I hope you remember. Okay. Then we have the esophagus. So after you have chewed your food up and you've moistened it with the saliva and the enzyme has started working on the carbohydrates, you will swallow the food. So it says the chewed mass of food passes down the pharynx, which is your throat, which is the tube that conducts air to the trachea. So you have, remember, your throat has got two pathways at the end of the throat. We have the airway for air, and we have the esophagus for food. When you swallow, the epiglottis covers the opening to the trachea so that food enters the digestive tract instead of the lungs. Very important. Lungs can't deal with food, right? Then you choke. From the pharynx, food passes to the esophagus. So our food tube is called the esophagus, which is a muscular tube. So it has muscle tissue in it that leads to the stomach. The stomach is also a big muscular pouch. It says waves of strong muscle contractions push the food along the esophagus, as shown in figure 10.4, and the waves are called peristalsis. So peristalsis is essentially the scientific word for swallowing. So once we have that little ball of chewed food, so this ball of chewed food is called a bolus. Bolus is just a fancy Latin term for ball. So it's a ball, right? You can see the muscle goes in behind the bolus. It kind of contracts in behind the bolus, and then it squeezes it down your esophagus to your stomach, right? So that's called peristalsis. It's the process by which food moves down your esophagus. And then we get to the stomach. So the stomach has two purposes. It is a big bag of muscle, and when it's empty, it's very small. It's only the size of like a large sausage, right? That's when it's empty. But as it fills with food, it can expand to hold 4 liters of food, but not usually any more than 4 liters. And probably you'll become full before you reach the 4 liter part. Um, Crazy kids have the gallon of milk challenge, where they challenge people to drink an entire gallon container of milk, and a gallon is 4 liters. And so people don't aren't able to finish 4 liters of milk because your stomach only holds 4 liters. So if there's anything else in your stomach, it's not going to be able to hold the gallon of milk, and then you'll, vomit. But that's what the kids like. And that's why people can't finish the gallon of milk challenge. Okay. So the main function of the stomach is to continue physical and chemical digestion. It does both. Okay. So physical digestion, the chunks of food are broken into smaller pieces as peristalsis, the wave of muscle, churns the stomach, right? So your stomach sort of squishes the food, and that's physical digestion, right? And at the same time, the stomach lining produces gastric juice. What's in gastric juice? Well, we have a mixture of water, right? We need water for hydrolysis, hydrochloric acid, which will help break down big chunks of food, mucus that lines the stomach and keeps it from eating itself, and enzymes. Okay. The acid in gastric juice is as strong as the acid in a car battery. So it's very, very strong. It activates the enzymes that chemically digest protein. So carbohydrates, their digestion started in the mouth. Protein, its digestion starts in the stomach. And the mucus helps protect the stomach from the powerful acid. If you don't make enough mucus, sometimes the acid can eat a hole in your stomach, and that's called an ulcer. The mixture of food and gastric juice that is churned up in the stomach is called chyme. So the food entered as a bolus, as a ball, but when it leaves, it's sort of a gross, squishy liquid, right? It's the same sort of liquid that if you vomited, that's what would come up, right? So that's called chyme. At regular intervals, small amounts of chyme are squirted through a sphincter. So this word sphincter is a hole, right? So the hole at the bottom of your stomach is called a sphincter, but a sphincter is a special kind of hole that is surrounded by muscle that can open and close. So the hole between your stomach and your intestine is not always open, right? So every once in a while, the muscle opens and allows a little bit more of the food, the partially digested food called chyme, through. Okay, so here we have a picture of the stomach. Okay, so we have the esophagus at the top, and there are two sphincters. There is a sphincter at the end of the esophagus that controls whether food gets into the stomach, and there is a sphincter at the bottom of the stomach, which controls whether food can leave the stomach. And you can see the stomach is a big bag of muscle. So the layers of the stomach are layers of muscle, 3 layers of muscle that allows your stomach to move in different directions, and it churns food, right? Churn means to move, to squeeze and move the food. Um, and then you can see there are folds on the inside of the stomach that enable it to increase in size. So it's all squished up if there's no food in it. But once you start adding food in it, the wrinkles expand and your stomach can expand. Isn't that neat? So that is your lesson on your mouth, your esophagus, and your stomach, and the role that they play in digestion.